All right, 112, folks. We're still in Unit 1. Unit 1 is Chapter 15, 16, 17. Um, there's a whole lot of stuff to cover in here, and some of you need to set up for. Chapter 15 was talking about Columbus, about the Spanish coming to the New World, about the Columbian Exchange and Encomienda system, and that's great. Um, 16 talks about trade, and it talks about China. Before I go there, I want to talk a little bit about really chapter 17, because what it talks about there is the Reformation. And the Reformation history is about tipping points, okay? It's about tipping points, about actions that happen, and those actions affect everything else that's going on around them. And so you got to roll back just a little bit. If you go back and think, okay, well, look, we talked about the Crusades. We talked about the Crusades increasing trade. Increasing trade is a good thing because we're a commerce-based society at this particular point. But that increased trade also increases this exchange. Part of that exchange is going to be the introduction of plague. Plague is going to wipe out 2/3 of parts of the population in Europe, which is awful. It's awful. But that doesn't teach us any lessons. It teaches us to be careful about what we bring back, but we're still going to trade. We're still going to go ahead and work on commerce. But because of that change, there's the effects, the social, economic change. Part of that is going to be the effects on the church. And I want to make sure we go back and talk about that because, listen, if the very beginning of the plague is talking about the church and saying, listen, this is God's retribution upon you, and the sinners are being punished. Well, when people from the church start to die off, when the members of the church, the officers of the church, the priests and the bishops start to die off, people start to ask questions and they start to doubt. And this doubt is significant, and they start to wonder about the church. When I say the church at this point being the Christian church, being the Catholic Church. There's a secondary church. We start talking about the Greek Orthodox Church, which is over in the old Roman Constantinople headquarters. But the church that comes out of Rome is the church. And this allows people to question what they've always been taught, to question what they always believe. This questioning is part of that expansion into the New World about exploring perhaps what the church said was wrong about science and technology before. And so people are going to expand. Well, the church is going to keep a good, tight foothold. And so what we do is we see this expansion of the Renaissance into the rest of Europe. We see the expansion of religion continue the rest of Europe. And what we do is we follow characters. So the character we follow is a guy named Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr. No, not the doctor, but Martin Luther, who actually is going to be the namesake of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his father, because they're going to borrow that name. And the idea being is he's a religious leader, but in the very beginning, he's not a religious leader. In the very beginning, he is well, how do you phrase this nicely? A skinny university student with a Catholic guilt complex, and I say that in a nice way because I grew up Catholic. Unless if you're properly Catholic, then you're properly guilty of doing something you're not supposed to have done, and that's a part of my upbringing. And so it's not a slam on anything. Well, he feels guilty about this, and what's interesting is he's devout. And he's going to be headed home from the university one day. He's going to get caught in a thunderstorm. And you've got lightning and thunder and an awful thing going. And the story is that he's going to drop down on his knees and lift up his head in prayer and say, God, if you will get me out of this, I'll devote my life to the church. Well, be careful. Be careful what you pray for, because he makes it home. He's safe. He goes home and tells Dad, guess what? I'm going to give up going to school to become a lawyer. I'm going to go ahead and become a priest. I'm going to join the church. And Dad was like, nah. Well, short story long, he becomes a priest. He becomes a priest and gets ushered to a small mining town in Germany where he comes close to death. He comes close to death because, again, he takes his vow of poverty. He takes his vow of taking care of the people very, very much to heart. And so he's going to give them his food. He's going to give them his firewood. He's going to give them his possessions. And when the church shows up to check on him, he's right at death's door because He has given everything away. They're going to bring him back to Wittenberg Cathedral, and he's stationed in the Holy Roman Empire. Not the Roman Empire, but the Holy Roman Empire that is going to be cobbled together, by Charlemagne and a few other folks along that line. And it's what remains. And this is really a network of about 90 different, more or less, city-states. Okay, small Princetons at this particular point that have agreed that they have a trade network to cooperate together and they have one general rule. What's going to happen is he's going to end up in Wittenberg, and then he is going to be brought back to health, and he's going to be studying, and he's going to be studying, and he's going to be studying, and then he's going to run into conflict. The conflict is going to be, well, it's finally going to come to a head when we start to see a bishop of the church come in and start to offer what's called an indulgence. And the indulgence, loosely, so I don't offend too many people, is more or less a get out of hell free card. According to church doctrine at this particular point, there are saints of the church without sin that are born with grace, and if they don't sin, then when they pass away, there is excess grace, and the church is allowed to tap into this excess grace, and through the use of donation or other gifts that you can buy an indulgence, which is the use of this grace to forgive you of your sins and ease your passage beyond the gates. Now, some of you are going, oh, it don't work like that. Well, that's Martin Luther. He's going to go, got a problem with this. He's going to look at that and go, you can't buy your way into heaven. And he's going to look and he's going to read. He's going to look, hey, right here it says, no, by faith alone are you saved, right? By acceptance of the Lord, by admission of your faith, by acceptance of Him, you're saved. And I'm not preaching at you. I'm just doing Martin Luther at this particular point. And so he's going to argue with the church. Okay, he's going to do this version of Twitter. He's going to do this version of Facebook. He's going to go ahead and write down his arguments with the church. He's going to have 95 theses, right? 95 arguments. He's going to write them down and nail them to the church door. Why? Well, because everybody who's educated is going to church. He wants to start a discussion at the church, and so he's going to post these theses, and it's going to start an argument. It's going to start a discussion. And what's going to happen is he's going to develop a following, and this following is going to go, yo, Martin, you're right, right? Not the first time you've heard that in this week, right? Martin, you're right. And so he's going to develop a following. He's going to preach. He's going to minister. He's going to develop this following. The problem is some of his beliefs go against main church doctrine. And so the church is going to reach out and go, come here, boy. We think what you're saying is heretical. We think what you're saying is against church doctrine. We need you to come. We need you to come here. We're going to have a diet, D-I-E-T, not as in what you eat, but as in a meeting of the church. We're going to have a diet at Worms, not a diet of worms. The boy does not have to eat worms, okay? But at Worms, as in Worms Cathedral. We want you to come and talk to us. We want you to come and tell us what you think. We want you to come and explain your choice of doctrine, and we guarantee you safe passage. Listen, folks, if somebody feels they need to guarantee you safe passage, make sure they guarantee you safe passage back home, because what they want to do is they want to try him as a heretic. Heretics don't come to a good end with the Catholic Church, because either you can recant or you can die and be purged of your sins after your death. And usually that involves fire and neat things like that. It's not good. And he says, okay, well, sure. I am going to go and defend my faith. I'm going to go ahead and defend what's going on. And what will happen is he's lucky enough to have a prince there who's going to say, yo, Martin, come here. Come home with me. Come home with me. Come talk to me. You tell me. I'll have my secretary write this down. I'll have the boy take this information and present it to the Diet in your name. Basically, what he does is he saved Martin Luther's life. Okay, he keeps him from going because in the past, heretics have been tried and killed. What I want to do is I want to pick up a little bit more about this, because the Reformation is a huge part of what's going to go on, and it drives colonization. So I'll pick it up in part 2.